Hello everyone! Today I'm going to be featuring the Tallinn, the Tier 8 Soviet heavy cruiser. It's the Tech Tree ship, and somewhat interesting, it is in the heavy cruiser split, meaning it's followed up by the Riga and the Petropavlovsk. But even though it's actually supposed to be the heavy cruiser, it has light cruiser armor. And it is a Hipper hull, which makes it even more interesting because unlike Hipper's 27mm plating, the Tallinn has light armor, meaning 25mm bow and stern and 25mm upper belt. On the other hand, it does get the 40mm icebreaker, so it is very efficient at pushing nose-in and YOLOing ships. I will be comparing this ship a fair bit to the Hipper, because it is based off the historical Lutsov, a Admiral Hipper class that was sold by Germany to the Soviet Union in the late 30s. So this thing very much existed. It was never finished though, and I'm not too convinced on these guns because the guns are quite interesting. We'll get into those in a bit. But it is a ship that was actually there. Regarding the Ochakov giveaway, I posted the winner on my Twitter, and I will be doing another giveaway when I make a review of the Bagration, which I haven't gotten around to making one yet, but there will be an opportunity to win one of those as well. Moving on, as mentioned, this thing does get the light cruiser armor, but it's worth mentioning that the Citadel armor is actually Eugen's Citadel armor, meaning it has the improved angled Citadel of 40mm. The difference between Hipper and Eugen Citadel is that the Hipper's angled Citadel has 30mm plating. And with how many 457mm guns you face in high tier these days, Eugen's 40mm is so much better than Hipper's 30mm, because if someone shoots at your Citadel, you have a significantly higher chance of not being Citadel because you can't get overmatched through that angled Citadel. So obviously Tallinn having this 40mm plating on the Citadel is a significant advantage when facing ships capable of overmatching. Overall though, the obvious differences between this ship and the Hipper are of course the health pool. This thing has 45k, Hipper has 33.8, but on the other hand this thing only has a 7% torpedo belt, whereas Hipper has a 10%. Small differences, but worth noting. When it comes to YOLO power, well, Hipper does have those 6 torpedoes per side, basically 2 X3 launchers per side. They are 6 kilometers of range, but on the other hand, they are German torps, which means they only deal 14k a pop. On the other hand, Tallinn has 1 torpedo less, but these torpedoes hit for 18k. And they're only 4k in range, but still, they hit like an absolute truck. So when it comes to YOLO power, they're quite equal, honestly. Both are extremely potent when pushing in close range against targets, because, well, that icebreaker makes it hard to kill them, and those good torpedo angles and powerful torpedoes make this cruiser very good at YOLOing into other ships. Handling-wise, they have significant differences. Tallinn gets the Soviet flavor in handling. What this means is that even though the ship with speed flag is faster, 34.8 knots compared to Hipper's 33.6 knots. The turning circle is a pretty dreadful 900 meters. In comparison, the Hipper turns in 740. So 160 meters worse turning circle, and I think a second or more worse rudder shift. So handling is very much the Soviet flavor. However, the concealment is actually 11.2, which is identical to Hipper's. It does get a worse plane detection as well, I think over 7 kilometers. On the other hand, speaking of planes, it does get Soviet AA, and in World of Warships, Soviet AA means that you have 5.8 km range on the AA. Otherwise it's quite identical to Hipper's anti-air, but the difference is that Hipper has that German anemic 5.2 km range on the AA, whereas Tallinn has 5.8. So I would absolutely say that the Tallinn wins that comparison hands down. Captain-wise, we do have to highlight, of course, that you can slot Kuznetsov on this thing, which just Kuznetsov is just such a good captain that it's always going to be considered an advantage. Lutyens is a pretty good cruiser captain, but Hipper struggles to make use of his special perk that improves your reload because of the lack of guns and honestly the quite long reload. Moving on, regarding reload, we should start covering the guns. Now Tallinn has 12 guns as opposed to Hipper's 8. Hipper has 4x2 and this thing has 4x3. So a pretty significant advantage. The Hipper, on the other hand, does have slightly faster reload, 2 seconds faster, 11.5 versus Tallinn's 13.5. But obviously that is by no means enough to offset the fact that, well, the Tallinn has 50% more barrels. The HE Alpha on the ships is actually identical, 2.5k, even though Tallinn's guns are only 180 and Hipper's are 203. And that is because of course that German HE Alpha is so anemic. The Hipper does have slightly better fire chance, but when it comes to fire starting capacity, I am quite confident that the Tallinn is just better because of the sheer amount of shells it throws out. AP Alpha goes heavily in Hipper's favor, 5.9k versus Tallinn's 4650. But of course, once again, 50% more barrels makes a pretty significant impact. More important than all this though, is of course the characteristics of the Tallinn AP. Tallinn AP is monstrously strong. In fact, I'm gonna put up a small chart for you guys to look at down here. And if you look at that chart, well, it becomes pretty obvious. The two red lines at the bottom, that's Hipper and Donskoy. Now keep in mind, Donskoy also has 180mm guns, just like the Tallinn, and in fact it has the same guns. But for some reason the Tallinn has a more advanced shell, AP33 compared to AP32. And this advanced shell seems extremely resistant to things like air drag. Because as you can probably see, the travel time, the dark red, is significantly better than Donskoy's travel time, which is the darker green. More important than that is of course the penetration capacity. That light blue line is the penetration capacity of the Tallinn. It completely beats the likes of Baltimore, Hipper, and even Donskoy AP in penetration. In fact, they start out pretty equal. But then that lack of air drag just makes the Tallinn AP so very efficient. And this means that the Tallinn can quite consistently citadel basically any cruiser at any range. As you can probably see on the likes of the Albemarle. The AP is incredibly potent, and one of the reasons why I don't even spec IFHE on the Tallinn, because you generally just want to be shooting AP at every single broadside you can see. Now, it's not just penetration that makes this Soviet AP so good. It's got a lot of factors going for it. It also has a shorter fuse. Normally, when you shoot at the target, basically there's a fuse arming threshold, which means you need to hit an armor of a certain thickness to arm the shell in order to make the shell arm inside the ship, meaning you get a full pen instead of getting an overpen. An overpen is when the shell punches straight through the ship without arming at all. Now, the fuse arming threshold on this ship is, as far as I could remember, I think it was something like 30 millimeters. Yeah, I think it was 30 millimeter fuse arming threshold. In comparison, most heavy cruisers sit at about 34 millimeters. So this ship, even though it has much harder hitting shells, much faster velocity and all this, are still capable of arming against even lighter cruisers without too many issues. It's more than this just that contributes to getting pens instead of getting overpens. The other thing is the fuse arming time, meaning after you punch through the armor, how long does it take for your shells to activate? And this is very important because the fuse arming time on the Tallinn is 0.022, which means 22 milliseconds. In comparison, once again, pretty much all the others get a significantly worse fuse arming threshold or fuse arming time. 33 milliseconds is the standard on 203mm guns, and even light cruisers tend to have a 25 millisecond fuse arming time. This thing gets a 22, which is of course that same as the Stalingrad guns, meaning it's that magical, it's those magical AP shells that both have the best penetration, best shell velocity, best fuse arming threshold, and best fuse arming time, which means that the AP is incredibly powerful. Very, very consistent and incredibly powerful whenever you can use it. It doesn't end there though. It rarely ends when it comes to Soviet AP. It also has the improved penetration angles. It used to be 55 to 65 degrees, but they changed it to 50 to 65, which of course still means that, well, your AP can pin at really good angles, as you can probably see there. The improved angles, short fuse arming threshold, or sorry, low fuse arming threshold, all of the, and of course the incredible penetration and velocity, all means that in combination the AP is basically the best you can get at tier 8. There is, I don't think there's anything that comes anywhere close to the AP you can get from a cruiser. Tallinn's AP is just very strong. It's the AP that Hipper could only dream of having. Adding the fact that you have 12 guns, and you can get some really disgustingly powerful AP volleys in on targets. So AP monster, more so than anything Hipper could ever dream of. It's I kind of expected them to tune it down a bit, but I guess they didn't feel like it. So now it's really hard for me to argue that any other ship even comes close. In fact, I thought the mines would have gotten somewhat close, because the mine's AP DPM is really filthy. And if we're talking flat targets, mine's AP DPM is obviously still going to be better. It won't Citadel, but it will deal a shit ton of damage, especially against the likes of BBs. But when you compare it to Tech Tree ships, other Tech Tree ships, Tallinn, absolute powerhouse. Highly recommend grinding this thing. If not for the Riga, then of course for the Petropavlovsk later on, but the Riga seems to be quite good as well. But the AP performance is just, it's out of this world for a tier 8 ship. You can absolutely compete even with tier 10s with this AP. Any cruiser you catch off guard, you can easily punish with these things. It's just very efficient. I mean, we're talking 200 millimeters of pen at 18 kilometers. At 18 kilometers, I mean, Des Moines has 152 millimeter belt armor, citadel armor. So at 18 kilometers, you have more than 50 millimeters of extra penetration when it comes to citadeling at Des Moines. So AP performance, fantastic. Up tiers quite well, because concealment 11.2. If you get top tier like in this game, well, then you're just an absolute bully. And I haven't even gotten into this aspect, stealth radar. Hipper and Eugen, of course, do not get access to radar. They do have German Hydro. This thing's Hydro is only 5 kilometers, so you lose 1 kilometer on the ship spotting Hydro. But in return, you get access to a 12-kilometer radar. With the module, you're able to push this to an 18-second radar. And with these fast, hard-hitting guns, 12 of them, you are extremely capable of just deleting DDs outright. I don't know why they needed another ship with stealth radar, but 11.2 km concealment combined with 12 km radar means an 800-meter buffer where you can just sail straight at DDs, as I did in this vid, and the second you get spotted, you radar them and you delete them. Albemarle rethinking his life choices and disengaging, popping a focus fire sector on the other one, and oh, we got a Nuremberg. Fighting a Nuremberg, it's only really a matter of time before I start getting citadels, angling my ship towards them and making sure the carrier doesn't get an easy drop in. AA is steadily shredding his planes, but he will probably still get that drop off, and he does, but no fire is started. Trying to get rid of the Nuremberg first, since he's providing so much broadside, and the Albemarle is kiting away. Royal Navy HE shells are of course so slow that he will struggle to get too many hits as long as I somewhat change direction every now and then. Also, of course, Royal Navy heavy cruisers have such poor DPM that I actually probably consider the Nuremberg a bigger threat at this point. Probably not very fair to the Albemarle, but I just don't have any respect for the Royal Navy heavy cruisers. Nuremberg eats the first citadel. Trying to line up a second one so I can just get rid of him. Oh, a second citadel, and that volley should be enough. Yes, that is the second citadel, and that is our Kraken. Up to 10 citadels at this point. The Albemarle has pushed in. I could technically switch to HE here, but I think he's going to get broadside, trying to disengage, And that's exactly what it looks like he's trying, or he's just trying to get all his guns in on target. Regardless, it doesn't matter. If I get to choose, if I get to use AP, I will obviously happily make use of it. And now he's giving me that flat broadside, the absolute worst thing you can do against these monstrous guns. Will to victory activates. That's of course another aspect. I didn't mention it at the start, but being able to run Kuznetsov means that even when it looks like you should die, you have access to another panic damage con panic heal, and with the speed and concealment on the ship, it can save your bacon and allow you to disengage and get out. In Plaque, 17 km away. He's angling a bit, but with these improved pen angles, I'm pretty sure I can citadel him as long as I can just find his citadel. Especially with desync, this might be quite a hard shot. Trying to line it up, he keeps disengaging. Oh, there we go. We land a double citadel on him, and that's our high caliber achievement as well. That was citadel number 12. I'd really like to get this kill, because then I'd have actually 7 kills in this game, but sadly the Ismail deletes him just before my volley can land, and the game ends. Only 160k damage, but on the other hand, we killed half the enemy team, 12 citadels, Confederate, high caliber, Kraken. Just the ship just feels so very powerful for a tier 8 cruiser. Normal tier 8 cruiser isn't really the best spot to be in, because, well, you face a lot of ships that have really hard hitting guns and you lack heal. But this thing has so much utility and just so much firepower that you can absolutely play around these weaknesses, and as a carry ship I see the Tallinn being able to pull off some pretty disgusting things. And I didn't even get to show the YOLO potential. Keep in mind that it does have a 40mm icebreaker, and it does have these 18k hitting torpedoes, 5 of them of each side. So you don't really want to brawl this thing either, because those torps are gonna hit you like an absolute truck. Team score wise, 2.9k base. Sadly didn't get that 7th kill. That would probably have pushed me over 3000 base XP, but hey, you can't get everything. This was still a pretty good demonstration of the strength of the Tallinn. Detailed report wise, well, we shot a bit of HE, but obviously heavily AP focused, because that AP is so powerful. The HE was mostly at the DDs or very angled ships. Potential damage 1 million, damage received 41k. Could have been more, of course, thanks to Kuznetsov, but overall a good demonstration of the capacity of the Tallinn. Let me show you guys the hull as well as the recommended build and some comparisons to Hipper Eugen. Alright, starting off. Actually, let's start by showing off the armor things that I highlighted. Namely, of course, well, the citadel angling that I spoke of. This angle here. Now this is that trolley citadel armor that often causes incoming shells to bounce off and, well, just arm inside the ship. You get full pens because you penned through the belt, or you can't even get door pens, but mostly this is what protects you from those 457mm guns. Now the Hipper does not get this. The Hipper has 30mm angled citadel armor, whereas the Eugen does have this 40. So Tallinn getting the 40mm plating does help it, especially when up tiered, because it means less of those weird citadels that you felt like shouldn't have been a citadel but ended up being one because of overmatch. Overall, the armor, as mentioned, this is the heavy cruiser line, but it still has that 25mm light cruiser plating. Probably, well, could be for balance reasons or maybe blueprints, not sure. It does get the 27mm deck armor. The guns, 180. Not really sure what to call these guns since the AP performance is so absolutely out of this world. Moving on, module wise, I would say get the hull upgrade first. It gives you AA, significant amounts of rudder shift, and a huge chunk of health. Follow that up with that gun range. Your default gun range of 17.7 is, of course, very good. It is identical to Hippers, yes, and it's more than enough. The 16.1 is you can deal with fine, so get the gun upgrade later. Only one consumable to choose between. You get Hydro, because defensive AA is so neutered, and I consider that pretty much garbage. Upgrade-wise, turret survival, radar duration. So if you don't have radar duration, you can run hydro. If you don't have hydro duration, just run engine room, because the Hipper Eugen and even the Tallinn all suffer from that high caliber HE potentially breaking the engine issue. Better dispersion on the guns, you don't need turret reverse, it's quite efficient at 22.5 without a captain. Steering gears, and finally concealment expert. Build wise, if you have Kuznetsov, he's the best captain on any ship ever in the history of World of Warships. Priority target, last stand, adrenaline rush, I'm talking out of my and I would say a superintendent for that additional radar, and concealment expert. This is the basic captain that you can use when you move on to the Riga as well, and when you move on to the Petropavlovsk. After this, I do like the improved fire chance, especially when shooting angle targets, but you should probably go for expert loader as soon as possible. The reload on these ships is pretty long, 13.5, so being able to quickly switch ammunition type is very nice. Expert marksman, I would say, is the last perk you should go for, because the turret reverse is so good you don't really need it. However, if you plan on moving this captain to the Riga and the Petropavlovsk, it will become quite necessary. If you want to really min-max, last stand just to protect your citadel or your engine from breaking could be more efficient. I do like the improved jack of all trades for faster radar, hydro and damage con, and of course very useful once you get Riga Petropavlovsk. Anyway, I am running this Soviet camo. Default premium camo looks like this, very German-esque of course, since it is a Hipper hull. I actually do quite like it, but this is that Soviet special camo that you can unlock. This is what it looks like. Signal-wise, improved fire chance, shorter fires, speed, faster consumables. AA, you actually have pretty decent. Ramming flag, you never know with that icebreaker. And I have run detonation, but that's mostly because I'm making a commentary and don't want to explode. Economic flags, well, if you have them, use them. If not, save them in case you need them for later. That was my Tallinn commentary. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will talk to you guys later.